All right, everyone, just one more minute. We're going to go ahead and get started here. All righty. Hey, Kelly, just checking in that you're there.
I am here.
All right, perfect. All right, everyone, we can go ahead and get this meeting started today as more people file in. My name is Andy Swerk. I'm with the Ventura County Resource Conservation District, also the watershed manager here with my colleague Heidi. Welcome to the June Ventura River Watershed Council meeting. We have a packed agenda that we'll get into in just a minute here. I just want to make a note to everyone that these meetings are recorded and posted publicly. So the recording is started. So just be careful on what's being said. And with that, we'll get right into it. All right. So the first speaker is going to be Kelly Dyer with the Casitas Municipal Water District. She's going to give a water supply update. And then after each of the presentations, we'll do the standard Q&A. All right, Kelly, let me unshare my screen and you should be able to take it away.
All right. Can you see my screen and hear me okay?
Perfect, loud and clear. Thanks, Kelly. Go ahead.
Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone. Let me see if I can start the slideshow. I'm Kelly Dyer. I'm the Assistant General Manager with Casitas Municipal Water District. And I'm giving a brief update on our water supply status. This is the federal drought monitor for the state of California. So you can see the entire state is in a drought. Ventura County is in an extreme drought. Although we've kind of been in that situation for many years now. It's been roughly 10 years of fairly dry conditions. So we've been dealing with a long-term drought scenario. And as we walk through this, I wanted to give a little bit of background on Casitas. For those that may not be as familiar, I'll give an update on our current water supply status, go through our water demands and conservation, and briefly touch on a couple projects we're working on that are regional interconnection projects. So Casitas is a special district that was formed in the 1950s. You're probably familiar with Lake Casitas, which is part of the Ventura River project, which is a federal facility that's owned by the United States Bureau of Reclamation. And Casitas operates and maintains that system. And so if you look to the right, that's our service area. And we serve both wholesale and retail customers. So wholesale customers are where we provide water to another water purveyor who then provides the water directly to customers. And so the orange areas are our wholesale or resale customers. That's the largest population within our service area. And then the green is our retail customers, where we provide water directly to the customer. And in 2017, Casitas acquired the Ojai water system, which is shown in red. It used to be the Golden State Water Company, which was a wholesale customer. So they've all been converted to retail customers. One of our major facilities on the Ventura River is the Robles Diversion and Fish Passage Facility. This is a picture of it on the right. The Southern California steelhead were federally listed as an endangered species in 1997. And this is a federal facility. So in 2003, National Marine Fisheries Service issued a biological opinion for Southern California steelhead. As part of that, we constructed fish screens and a fish ladder. So the fish screens prevent fish from being diverted into the canal and into Lake Casitas. It routes them back over to the Ventura River, and then the fish ladder allows for upstream passage of steelhead. And so those were constructed in 2006, and we have pretty complex operational flow criteria to provide in-stream flows for steelhead passage. Okay, so as for our water supply status, for the 2022 water year, this is rainfall totals at 2 stations at Matilaha Dam and Casitas Dam. So we had about 22 inches of rainfall at Matilaha and almost 18 at Casitas, which is slightly above what we had for the last 10-year average, but it is below what's called the base period average that's tracked by the County of Ventura. Most of that rainfall happened between October and December, and we had about 7,000 acre feet of inflow into Lake Casitas during that time. So it was really a great fall. We were really excited about the new water year, but then it just pretty much stopped raining, and we didn't have any significant rainfall since January. So this is Casitas's overall supply mix going back to 2013, and the lighter blue bars are the water that's supplied from Lake Casitas to our customers. The dark blue is groundwater from the Ojai system, and then the yellow is groundwater from the Upper Ventura River groundwater basin. So as you can see, 2013 is kind of when, well, 2011 was the last really wet year, and I think in 2012 is what I would call the beginning of the drought period. But since it started, we've really seen a reduction in the amount of water used from Lake Casitas. And that's part of the demand management that I'll talk about a little later. So we do operate 2 separate drinking water systems. There's the main Casitas system, which has been in place since the 1950s for us. That system is fed primarily by Lake Casitas. About 99% of the water going into that system is from Lake Casitas, and then we have the one groundwater well, which provides about 1% of the supply. And then for the Ojai water system, that system has its own wells from the Ojai groundwater basin, and it's supplied roughly 80% on average by groundwater, and then it's augmented with additional supplies from the Casitas system. So starting with the groundwater, this is a chart from the Ojai Basin Groundwater Management Agency, who tracks our manages our groundwater levels. So as of April of 2022, the groundwater levels are estimated to be at about 67% of capacity. You can see it's not near the historic highs, but it's also not, it's kind of right in the midpoint. It's not at historic lows either. So we expect that groundwater supply will be available for the next year. Upper Ventura River groundwater basin. This chart is prepared by the Ventura River Water District, and it's kind of a similar situation. Current groundwater levels are not quite at the historic highs or the lows. So again, we expect our well supply to be available from that basin this year as well. Okay, so Lake Casitas storage. When you look at this chart, the red bar is our storage levels, and the black bars at the bottom are precipitation. And so really since 2012, we've had very minimal precipitation except for a couple of years. Our current storage levels are roughly where they were back in 2018. And then you can see we had a good rain year in 2019, which bumped up the reservoir and gave us some reprieve. So that's kind of where we're sitting right now. We're preparing for continued dry conditions, but if we get one good rain year, that can stretch our supplies a few more years. Okay, and this is our another view of our storage. This is going back to 2006 when the biological opinion was started to be implemented. And at the bottom, the red bars are the total diversions at Robles on an annual basis. And the blue is the total water that stays in the Ventura River downstream of the diversion on an annual basis. And so we typically take out less water than what stays in the river on an annual basis. And what's really interesting on this chart is from 2012 to 2016, you can see there just really wasn't any water. There just was such a dry period. So there was a decline in the water levels and also a decline in the steelhead population during that period. From a supply planning perspective, we look ahead assuming no additional inflows to Lake Casitas. And so based on our current storage levels and current demands that we're experiencing from the lake, we're projecting that we would go to a stage 4 level within about 6 months or so. So we're currently in a stage 3, which is 30% mandatory conservation, and a stage 4 would be 40% conservation. And then a stage 5 could be this time next year if we don't get some rain. But we do have, based on our current demand levels, approximately 3 to 4 years of supply remaining in Lake Casitas. And if we get more conservation, that just stretches the supplies even farther. So just a little bit more about the stage levels. Those are based on our water efficiency and allocation program. That is really Casitas's cornerstone policy for demand management. It was established in 1992 in response to the drought at that time. And basically what it is each customer has an allocation. And then as Lake Casitas levels decline, the allocations are reduced. And so as the lake level declines, our conservation targets increase. And if customers go over their allocation, they receive a penalty for doing so. So looking at how our water is being used, off to the right there, you can see what our stage 3 target is. That's the 30% mandatory conservation compared with the 1989 base year. And our customers are going above and beyond. There's actually have been conserving at stage 4 and 5 levels already. So what's interesting on this chart too is just you'll notice that the green is our agricultural use. The blue is city of, well, it's resale gravity, which is primarily the city of Ventura. And then the rest are our retail urban water use for residential, commercial, industrial uses. So we have been seeing really great conservation during the extended drought period. We never really got out of the drought. The rest of the state had a drought period around 2014 and then kind of got out of it. Now they're back in it. So I guess if you're looking at different base years, what we're seeing is a 45 to 60% reduction in water use compared to 1989. And then we have a 20 to 40% reduction compared with the 2013 base year, which was the one of the base years used by the state in the last drought. There are new state requirements or state emergency regulations for conservation. And one of the things that's being talked about is using 2020 as a new base year. and requiring a 15% reduction from that point. But as you can see, I mean, Casitas was already in a restricted demand scenario. So it's a little difficult to try and change the target at this point and have everything measured based on 2020. Okay, so regional interconnection projects that are under design. We have a couple interconnect projects that I just wanted to touch on. One is the Ventura Santa Barbara County's intertie, which is an interconnection to the north. It's a 1.3 mile pipeline that would connect Casitas' system to the Carpinteria Valley Water District system. And they are connected to the State Water Project, which I call this basically the water grid. And it would allow for Casitas to receive its state water that it's been paying for decades. And it also is an emergency interconnection. It flows both directions, so it can provide emergency supply both to Carpinteria and to Casitas during emergency periods. Obviously, the state water allocation was extremely low this year, so the idea is to take the water when it's available. I mean, there are times when Oroville is spilling, so we would take the water when it's available and try and build up our Lake Casitas storage during those times. And it could also allow for opportunities for water transfers and exchanges. There are quite a few agencies connected to that system that have diverse water supplies that that may have times of surplus that we could purchase water if we're in need of it. So that's one project. And then the other is the City of Ventura Callegas interconnection. This is being led by the City of Ventura and Callegas, and it would bring water to the City of Ventura, which would then offset use of Lake Casitas. So it's not a direct connection to Casitas' system, but it could provide exchange water to offset demands on Lake Casitas. And I believe our next speaker, Jennifer Treba, will be talking a little bit more about that project. So that is all that I have, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. I really do appreciate that, Kelly. Great presentation. Very informative. Do we have any questions from anyone? I think you have to raise your hand digitally or enter into the chat, and I'm able to read it. Give it just a minute here. Really interesting to see the change in water levels over the years. All right, Bert, I'm gonna hit allow to talk. You should be able to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Oh. Hi, Kelly. Thanks for this excellent presentation. I had a question. When Mike Flood presented the short-term forecast, he talked about 3 to 4 years of available water in the lake, but your chart looks like it's 4 to 5 years. Why was he kind of downgrading the number of years left in the lake?
Hi, Bert. Thanks for the question. I think the main reason is because the lake levels have never gotten that low before. So it's probably just to be conservative in case we experience water quality issues at really low lake levels. So the 3 to 4 is probably, just a more conservative estimate, assuming some of the the dead pool, or what's called the dead pool, where the water becomes unusable at low lake levels.
Yeah, I was thinking it might be helpful if you put your minimum pool level on that chart, because you don't plan to go all the way down to 0 as the chart shows, but you plan to stop at some minimum pool. But I don't know what that was. How many acre feet is the minimum pool?
Well, that's a good question. So we just updated our operational yield for Lake Casitas, which is based on modeling of various hydrologies and our biological opinion. And in that modeling, it's estimated that the lake would stay above 40,000 acre feet based on the hydrologies and climate change that were in the model. So if it goes below that, then I believe that the dead pool is around somewhere 5,000 or 1,000, where it gets below the intake. So again, the water levels have never gone that low before. We're certainly going to try to manage it so it doesn't go below a minimum pool, but we're the exact number is not quite certain at this point.
Okay, very good. So we have maybe 3 to 4 years left if we have a repeat of 2012 to 2017 rain years. So how many years out are our, I would call them emergency connections to, you know, Camarillo and Carpinteria?
The one on Santa Barbara side is the design is expected to be complete in 2024, and then it would probably take about a year or so to construct it. So, you know, that's 3 or 4 years out. The one to the south, I'm going to let the city of Ventura speak to that, but I would imagine it's not going to be faster than that. It won't be faster than that timeline because it's a longer project, and it also requires action by Callegas to construct their portion of the project. But, you know, we are considering and preparing for the event that those pipelines are not in place by the time we need them. So we're looking at backup contingency plans as well.
So when you talked about the conservation level, the board decided to stay at stage 3. And you mentioned that we could, if we have a dry winter next winter, we could be looking at stage 5 this time next year. So we would have, I don't know, 5-6 years of stage 3, 6 months of stage 4, and then boom into stage 5 a year from now.
That's correct. Yeah, it's these stage levels were developed back in the 90s, and they're also tied to our biological opinion. But yeah, what our plan is to go back to the board this fall in October to see how the summer went with and where the lake is at in the fall, and then you know, stage 4 could be implemented if the board decides to do it. It would be somewhere in the, you know, a January timeframe, I would expect. And then the stage 5 would come later in the summer of next year if that's warranted. So
Yeah, and by your chart, it looks like your residential water use is pretty small compared to the total water use, but looks like it has been increasing since 2019.
well, it has a little bit, yeah. In 2017, there was a bump because of the acquisition of the Ojai water system. So that's where you can see the bump in residential in 2017.
Right.
It stayed relatively the same, but it does vary with weather. So in really, you know, really dry years we have more water demand, and when it rains, then people don't need to irrigate outside as much. So it does fluctuate with weather.
Yeah, the ag customers and Ventura are the biggest babies in the lake. Anyway, thank you very much, Kelly.
You're welcome. Thanks for the great questions, Bert.
All righty, thanks, Bert, for that. And looks like you asked a few questions others were going to ask. So thanks, Bert. Appreciate that. All right, guys, we're going to move on to the next presentation here. Thanks so much for taking the time there, Keller. Really do appreciate that. Great presentation. All right, we're going to move on to Jen. You ready? You ready there?
I am. Just need to share. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, go ahead. So we got Jennifer Trudeau from the City of Ventura presenting today on a water supply update following this one. All right. Coming in perfect, looking good there.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So I'm going to give a broad overview of the city's water supplies. I'm going to talk a little bit about our water supply planning processes, walk us through the current demand and supply assessment, our most recent comprehensive water resources report, and then talk about a couple of projects underway to ensure that our customers have a resilient water supply. Okay. All right, so Ventura is one of the largest cities in California that relies completely on local water supply sources. But the recent drought has shown vulnerabilities in our supply and the need to diversify and consider new supplies, which I'll discuss later in the presentation. As this graphic shows, we have 6 water supplies. We get water from Lake Casitas through Casitas Municipal Water District. We get water from the Ventura River. And then we have 3 groundwater basins we extract water from: Mound Basin, Oxnard Plain Basin, Santa Paula Basin. And then we have a small amount of water from our water reclamation facility that we serve as recycled water to customers. So the city's total water use and the makeup of our supply sources have changed over time. Prior to 2005, we relied much more heavily on our surface water supplies, Lake Casitas and Ventura River. Our demands have decreased steadily over the past 20 years, and our recent demands are about 20% lower than our 2013 demands. So we have 3 major water supply planning efforts at the city. One is our annual comprehensive water resources report, where every year we look at our comparisons between demand and supply in the short term and the long term. We have our urban water management plan, which we do every 5 years. And then our water shortage contingency plan is updated every 5 years, but then implemented every year through our comprehensive water resources report. So I'll just give a quick overview of each of these planning efforts. The urban water management plan is a state requirement, and it looks out 20 years at water supplies to make sure that we have long-term water supplies. We just completed that most recent one last year. And the water shortage contingency plan defines the procedures for when supplies cannot meet demands. It looks at annual supply demand assessment and determines the stages of action and what the city will do and require its customers to do in the event of a shortage. And then, like I said, our comprehensive water resources report is really our main, what the city relies on for their water supply planning in the short term. We look at our short-term and long-term supplies. We look at supply and demand projections for the current year and 2 more years of drought. And then we use that data to determine whether or not a water shortage exists according to our water shortage contingency plan and implement the stages necessary. So I'm just going to walk through the most recent comprehensive water resources report. I think, the first step when we're looking at projections is how good are we at projecting our demands and supplies using these methods. So we look at that when we start our planning process each year. As you see here, we're pretty close on our on the demand side. Our demands were a little higher this year than we projected. And then on the supply side, things stay pretty close. We got a little bit more water from the river than we anticipated. We had some issues with wells in the Mound Basin, so we had less production there. but in all, those numbers are lower because we're only producing water that we need. So we're only producing water to meet demands. Okay, and then, an important part of our planning process is we look at our, what's our baseline for demand projections, what's our baseline demand, and then what is we're looking for growth. And so over the years, we've used both a 10-year and a 5-year average for our baseline demand. Because our consumption has decreased since 2013, these last couple of years, we decided to start using a 5-year baseline to represent the change in water usage from our customers. But we evaluate whether that's appropriate each year. So if we need to go back to a 10-year average, if the demands are increasing, then we can do that. But for this year, we're looking at a 5-year baseline for our demands. So that's the 14,000. And then we look at growth. And so we have demand factors that we apply for different types of development. We completed our demand factor study in 2020, and it uses consumption data from 2013 to 2018. And so we apply those, we get information from our planning department on which projects are in the plan and the construction stages, approved and construction stages for projects, and we apply our demand factors to those projects, and then we estimate how much water those projects will be utilizing. So as you can see here, we're looking at, of the projects that are on the books right now, we're looking at about a little over 800 acre feet per year of water usage. That water gets, that we know that not all the growth is going to happen at once. So we look at, of those projects, we're looking at those will be developed over the next 5 years. And again, we look at this every year because new projects come on and come off each year. And so we are looking at applying, a little less than 200 acre feet per year for growth. So like I said, in addition to looking at demand projections, we're also looking at supply projections. And so we're looking at, what's our supply capacity of our water supplies versus what's our existing supply, what we think we will get out of those supplies in the next 2 years if we continue into the drought. And then we do a longer term normal projection. And so we're looking at, we've adjusted as far as our as far as following Casitas's WEEP and shortage requirements, our purchases are reduced by 30% during a stage 3. So we reduced those, and we assumed we did look at doing that we would be being reduced to a stage 4 in 2024. So this shows our supply projections from that we just completed in April. And then we compare those two things. So we've done our demand projections and we look at our supply projections, and then we compare them against each other. And this is our water shortage contingency plan. If the triggers, if demand is supply is lower than demand, and what our demand reduction goals are. So we do our calculations each year to determine if we're in a stage. So for this year, we have our supply projection is 17,000 acre feet, and our demand projections are 14,257. We do for safety, to be conservative, we assume that we look at the annual rainfall and apply an adjustment factor, knowing that when in dry years, irrigation may increase. And so we apply our climate adjustment factor based on this year's rainfall, we put our demands, a potential demand increase at 5%. So our adjusted demand projection is almost 15,000 acre feet. But again, our supply projections are a little over 17,000. So a water shortage stage is not triggered this year. And so aside from looking just at the current year, we look out at future years to see if we'll have a shortage in the near future, given our projections. As you can see from this chart, we're looking like we would not be in a stage from 22 through 2024, even if we continue into the drought. And again, we look at this every year, so we can adjust if that's change, if our assumptions change over the next 12 months. And this is just a graphical depiction of that data, showing that supplies are greater than demands, even if we have a drought adjusted demand. So even though we are not in a shortage emergency currently, we do know that our current supplies are vulnerable, and that we want to make sure that we have long-term water supplies for our customers that are reliable. This is just a summary of some of the things that are challenging our water supplies. Regulations to use water more sustainably, climate change, reduced rainfall and runoff to the surface water supplies. So, we're looking at what we need to do to have more resilient supplies. So this graphic shows our future demands out, and the top two bars are our new water supplies that I'm going to talk about in just a minute. This slide just shows the need for those supplies. So as you can see that, as we get out to 2035, if we don't have these new supplies come online, our demands will be greater than our supplies. So we know that we may not need these in the next 5 years, but we do need them in the next 10 to 15 years, and we better get started planning those now. So we have two future water supplies I'm going to talk about. Ventura Water Pure, which is really our main water supply that we're talking about to meet future growth. And then we have the State Water Interconnection Project, which is really more of a diversifying project that is meant to meet existing demands that to make up for some of these lost in current supply. So to make up for potential losses in groundwater allocations, to make up for potential losses from the lake or reduced deliveries from the lake. So for Ventura Water Pure, it's taking wastewater from our existing water reclamation facility and constructing an advanced water purification facility where that wastewater will go. That purification facility is creating highly purified water that we're then going to inject into the Oxnard Basin, and then extract that water and send it through our existing water conditioning facilities and distribute to our customers. And this, just a quick on this one, I just wanted to highlight, the planning process here. I think there's a lot of people say, it takes 10+ years to do a water supply project. And so, when you're looking at potential supply and demand imbalances in the next 10 years. But we really started this project back, this project really began in 2008, 2012, in an effort, in necessity to remove our discharge from the Santa Clara River estuary. And so this just kind of so I think some of these outer dates are probably going to be adjusted outward a little bit, but this just kind of shows that process of that it really is a long-term planning process from conception to actual production of water. And then our other project, as Kelly mentioned, is the State Water Interconnection Pipeline. And this is a partnership project with Callegas and Casitas and United Water Conservation District. It's the pipeline from Callegas' system to be able to deliver our own state water project allocation to the city. And so we're looking at starting construction by the end of 2023 and then having a 2-year construction window. So we're looking at, potentially late 2025 for that project coming online. And we're looking at, I think maybe some of you have seen that we are working on an agreement with San Antonio Pass Water Agency to transfer some of our water project allocation to them. And that deal, we until we have the connection, they receive all of the allocation. But once our connection is built, we retain the rights to the first 2,000 acre feet of the state water project water if the allocations are there. And that's, through our urban water management planning process, we need about probably 1,300 acre feet per year to meet water quality, to blend with our groundwater, to help with our water quality issues for our hard water on our east end. And so we think that 2,000 is more than enough to meet water quality standards and make up for some minor losses in supplies between now until the water pier is online. And so this slide just shows a little bit of the city's future in terms of the makeup of our supplies. So this is looking at taking all of our water supplies and scaling it down to demand and looking at how much of each water supply we'll likely be using, and how much of each supply source. So this is kind of shows in the future what we're looking at. And you can see that in wet years, we're going to rely a little bit more heavily on the Casitas and the river if those supplies are available. And then in drier years, we'll rely more heavily on our groundwater supplies. And then those new supplies coming in and making up, more than 20%, sometimes over 30% of our supply in the long term. So just a couple more slides on, aside from our water management planning and looking at new supplies, we do encourage our customers to do conservation. As I mentioned, since 2013, we've had 20% reduction in usage. We still maintain our water conservation programs. We do lawn replacement programs, irrigation controller, we do water surveys, and our most popular product is our instant hot water recirculating pump. And so we'll be boosting those conservation efforts over this next year as we encourage our customers to conserve even more during this extended drought period. And then just we are about to complete our transition to advanced metering infrastructure project, where I think we're about 99% finished with our installation of our meters, and we just have sort of the last few outstanding ones that were not as simple retrofits, and so that should be completed by the end of this year. And that really helps customers look at their demands and why their water bill is going up and where their usage is changing, and it helps us to do some leak detection from our end and contact those customers when they may have a leak so that they can get that repaired quickly. All right, and that concludes my presentation if there's any questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate that presentation as always, Jen. I think we definitely have one question. We have two questions. One was in the chat. What is the assumption underlining the significant projected increase in groundwater at 2030 from water pure? I can unmute Kathy to see if she wants to elaborate on that.
Yeah, let me look. Let's see. Yeah, I didn't make this graph, so I'll have to look more into that a little bit. But I think it's just highlighting that, you know, during dry years, that the river supplies are not going to be available. So, so then we'll have to make that up through groundwater usage.
Okay, I'd like to clarify a couple things. I know we're using indirect potable reuse, so we're pumping this used water, to make a nice term of it, into treating it, pumping it into the ground, and then being able to pull it out later. That's why my question was related to, are we increasing our source of groundwater by pumping it into the ground and then pulling it out later? So I was trying to figure out what percentage is direct, like you're saying we're going to use so much water pure and so much groundwater. I'm curious how we're going to know the difference. And then the other thing is, I was curious about, I thought we were going to be taking water from the state when it was available and storing it. But it sounds like are we getting that up to Casitas for storage, or how are we doing that?
So how the interconnect will work with Casitas is still being worked out. So but for the plan is that when Casitas asked us to, we will we'll utilize State Water Project water instead of using Lake Casitas water. That's not included in my graph, that because it'll be kind of a year-to-year decision on State Water Project availability and where the lake, the status of the lake, and whether or not Casitas would like us to take their State Water Project water.
But we're not able to store water in Casitas from the State Water Project in heavy rainfall years.
I'm going to let Kelly answer that question.
With the other connection, which is a direct connection, we would have infrastructure and the plumbing in place to do that. But the one on the south that Jennifer was discussing is not a direct connection to our system.
Okay, thank you. And then the issue of how you segregate whether you're using groundwater or water pure, I'm kind of curious about that, since we're pumping water pure water into the groundwater.
Yeah, so we're working on models for that now, and you know we'll be utilizing particular wells to pump out that water, and so the graph I had in the presentation does not group those together. So the groundwater that's being pumped is showing that it's groundwater from our groundwater allocations from our different basins, and then the additional Ventura water pure water is not counted as groundwater. But I think that's a good question. But yeah, we will be accounting for that through monitoring of the wells that are pumping that water, and then we'll know how much water we're injecting, and so we'll be able to sort of do that accounting of how much is going in versus how much is coming out.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks, Kathy. Appreciate that. All right, we got quite a few questions here, so we're going to move through. I apologize. The next one is going to be Bard. Is it Bartimaeus? Please.
Yeah. Thanks. And thanks for these presentations. They're great. Jennifer, two quick questions. One is, can you speak to the issue of salinization in the Oxnard groundwater basin and how much of a factor that is? And secondly, and this is really kind of to both presentations, given the fact that agricultural use is, I think, 2/3 or more, why is so much attention given to residential conservation programs? So thank you.
Okay, I'll do my best to answer those questions on a high level. And as far as the Oxnard Plain Basin is concerned, for looking at seawater intrusion, the groundwater sustainability plan has been developed for that groundwater basin that looks at trying to minimize the seawater intrusion by 2040 through, according to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act that was passed. Through that process, the city has an allocation of groundwater. And then the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency is still working on how they're going to implement that GSP and whether there's going to be pumping reductions or there's going to be projects. As for our planning processes in our urban water management plan, in our comprehensive water resources report, we are assuming that we'll see up to a 40% reduction in our groundwater allocations through that process. And so that's our current planning assumes that we're going to see that the city will have a reduction in groundwater allocations for that basin. And that's primarily to address the seawater intrusion issue. As far as the conservation question, I think from a local government, I can't really answer that question. We only serve residential customers, and we have state regulations for, current regulations for conservation and future regulations for conservation coming at us. And so we're just looking at ways that we can be efficient for usage, but still meet the needs of our customers. And hopefully agricultural users will be doing the same on their end.
Yeah, this is Kelly. Maybe if I could just add on that last part, because a lot of conservation regulations are coming from the state. A lot of it is focused on residential, but there is SGMA, which is, captures the ag customers. That's the Sustainable Groundwater Management Planning. What I would say is for residential outdoor use, that's really discretionary water use. That's where customers have a choice on how they're going to be watering outside in residential areas. Agriculture that's a business. And so from a cost perspective, most of them are already trying to reduce their water use because it costs money to buy water. So it gets into just where the discretionary use is sometimes.
Perfect. Well, thank you both for that. I appreciate it. We're going to ping over to Paul now. Paul, you should be allowed to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I've been watching this unfold over the years. It's been very interesting. We were early advocates of the Ventura Pure Recycling Facility. It's really good to see that happening. I think that's probably the most reliable news source of water for the city of Ventura, especially given the state water project. I hate to see expecting to get 1,500 acre feet or something from the state water project in the future is maybe not going to be realistic. So I appreciate the fact that the water managers are, struggling with an uncertain future and trying to plan ahead. Is definitely an interesting thing. But my question regarding the water pure, initially that was intended to be a direct potable reuse and it went to indirect. Is that just due to state regulations, or are there other factors, involved with that?
Yeah, the primary reason is state regulations. And I think, and those regulations are hopefully coming soon. The issue right now is that, financing we can't get financing, grants, loans for a technology that isn't supported by state regulations. So we are looking very carefully at that, but at this point, it's indirect potable primarily because of the regulations issue.
So if that evolved, you would be able to go back and retrofit what you're doing now to be direct?
Yes, potentially. I think we're, looking at, I think that's something we're looking carefully at now in terms of how we invest in the infrastructure and how we construct the project so that we can be flexible and spend the least amount of money.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Because I mean, indirect is great. It recharges the aquifer, but you end up having to treat the water twice. So there's a certain cost to that.
Yeah, and one thing I didn't discuss through this is, our water quality issues in terms of hardness from our groundwater. And so, if we had direct potable, it would give us more flexibility for blending and improving water quality throughout the city.
Yeah, exactly. Because basically you got what do they call it? It's a pretty pure water that comes out of there. So the only other thing I wanted to add is that we definitely support the city's lawn rebate program. I think it's really important in the residential areas to retrofit the landscapes as much as possible. But at the same time, we need to recognize the need for shade trees and fruit trees in residential areas. Just as things heat up, we need to make sure that we maintain the urban forest canopy. And that is somewhere where gray water can be extremely beneficial. And essentially what you're doing there is recycling the water on site at the site of the user. And it's definitely a way to maintain, a green landscape, and the urban forest and shade. And make the best use of that resource. So I would encourage the water agencies to start looking seriously at gray water throughout the watershed. I think it could be, a very beneficial reuse that can be cost effective if done correctly.
All right. Well, thank you, Paul, for the great questions. And yeah, echoing the urban forest. I know the RCD's been trying to get some funding to do that with Watershed Progressive and a few others. Let's move on. We got one more question here, I believe, that hasn't been asked from Bert. Does the limit of 2,000 acre feet in the San Gorgonio agreement preclude a potential in lieu agreement with Casitas to reduce the demand on Lake Casitas?
Yeah, great question. It does not. So our exchange agreement with Casitas, when we take more state water, in order to take less water from the lake, we'll be taking Casitas's state water allocation. And so that the leasing of anything above 2,000 acre feet doesn't preclude us from participating in an exchange agreement with Casitas.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that, Jen. All right, everyone, we're going to take a 5-minute break here. So let's return at 10:08 and we'll continue with the other two presentations for the morning. Thank you to the presenters so far. Appreciate it. And yeah, we'll talk pretty soon. Thanks, everyone. Hey, Kate, are you there?
Yes,
You want to share your presentation? We're starting in just a minute here.
okay. Just pull that bad boy up.
All right, perfect. We're going to start in just a minute.
All right.
All right, everyone, we're going to resume the meeting for the morning. We got up next is Kate Furlong with Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council. She's going to present and discuss an update to the Ventura County Community Wildfire Protection Plan, also known as a CWPP. All right, Kate, well, feel free to take it away.
All right, good morning. So now here's a change for something completely different from what we've been discussing already this morning, but it is still relevant. So my name is Kate Furlong. A lot of you know me because I used to be with the council before. So I'm now with the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council. So if you guys don't know what a Fire Safe Council is, just a little bit of background, that we're grassroots community-based organizations in the state of California. And we all share the same objective of making our communities less vulnerable to catastrophic wildfires. Of course, there we go. So the mission of our organization currently is to reduce the threat of wildfires to farms, ranches, urban neighborhoods, and infrastructure through programs of action, education, and collaboration, with a vision to ensure that our communities are fire resilient, safe, and prepared to withstand the threat of wildfires. So we're able to do this through a myriad of programs, which include free chipper events throughout the county. We help support defensible space creation and hazardous vegetation removal through grants and through partnerships, like working with the RCD. We also are starting a new program that's all throughout the county where we conduct home ignition zone assessments. And this is where we inform people of different vulnerabilities that their structures have to ember intrusions, which is the most likely cause of houses being lost during wildfires. We also do mapping for ranches for emergency purposes and do educational webinars, support the Ready, Set, Go program through the Ventura County Fire Department, and hired vendor trainings. And what my major program is updating the Ventura County-wide community wildfire protection plan, as well as creating local plans. So CWPP, so these are community-based programs, so trying to really work from the grassroots level, focusing on identifying and addressing what our local hazards are and what our risks from wildfires, and to determine what the risks are and create a roadmap of actions for the community to address. So not just the fire departments, but for everyone throughout the community. And the key requirements are working in collaboration with different groups, prioritizing fuels reduction projects, and also focusing on the treatment of structural ignitability. So that's where our home hardening comes into play. So there's a lot of different benefits to creating CWPPs. And the main one and the major component is that it opens up a bunch more funding. So these templates and these plans are through CAL FIRE, but they can be utilized for grant applications for a lot of other funders as well. So creating a strong CWPP is a really good foundation for a lot of grant writing, and it can also really help smaller organizations who don't have the access to resources to be able to have this background and signed approved documents. And also a big component of what I'm trying to do is to connect to lower levels throughout the community, such at the resident level, to get them more informed of what's happening, to let them know what their risks are and learn from them, what their experiences were during the Thomas Fire, during Woolsey, during the Hill, and even smaller fire events, and learning what we can do to help support them and make things a little easier. And yeah, fuels reduction projects are a main component of this, and I'll speak on that more in a minute. This also helps us gain access to more networks, as it shows that we're doing our due diligence and we are being active in our planning process. It enhances our stewardship, just educating people on, projects that they are doing have multiple benefits, and also adds a lot more community buy-in for the work that we're doing. Increases a lot of social learning, and it helps spawn a lot more of the projects and opportunities. So I have a lot of different CWPPs in process right now. So I'm focusing on creating localized smaller plans first. Of working with the city of Fillmore, with the two major land trusts that are within the hillsides of Ventura. So Rancho Ventura Conservation Trust and the Ventura Land Trust, working with the city of Ventura. I'm also trying to focus on working with the West Side Community Council, because it's a densely populated area that is impacted by every natural disaster. So I want to make sure that their voices are elevated and their concerns are heard. Working with the greater Ojai area. So this is the first section is all the Ventura River Watershed, except for Fillmore. Working with the city of Santa Paula, working in Piru, Bell Canyon, Serrano Canyon, which is pretty much on the county line just before Malibu. And then utilizing all of this information for the Ventura County-wide update. So the last plan that was created and approved for the County of Ventura was March 9th of 2010. So as you can imagine, there's been a lot of changes in the management in the area. Almost every agency has a new leader, and we've also experienced several devastating wildfires, and our regimes are shifting drastically. So I want to utilize these localized plans to influence the update. I'm working with fire departments and police departments, the Office of Emergency Services through the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, working with cities, agricultural groups, parks and recreation, land managers, transportation agencies, other nonprofits, groups of scientists, universities, and state officials. I've also been working with the UCSB Bren School to create a management plan. So we're trying to focus on how we can decouple the vulnerability and marginalization of the impact of wildfires when it comes to addressing community barriers, resource limitations, and create a more inclusive process. We conducted surveys and focus groups, identified that Santa Paula, Piru, and Fillmore are the most heavily impacted due to social vulnerabilities. So we're trying to make sure that we're listening to voices, elevating them and addressing concerns, and trying to make the wildfire planning process more inclusive, and try to make the response and everything more equitable as well. Trying to assess people's experiences and how we can try to mitigate the issues that we've experienced before. There's different components that are within a CWPP. So we try to do a full overview of each area, which focuses on the landscape, the topography, what the fire history is, key infrastructure, and also infrastructural hazards. If there's oil or anything that could cause a more hazardous situation if there is a fire that goes through, and what firefighting resources are available. We focus on identifying what the priorities are for each of these areas, what projects are completed and what's ongoing, and what are our future goals and projects. And this focuses on structural hardening, defensible space, fuels treatment, evacuation, but then we can also expand to other mitigation efforts. So for these components, I've been working with a bunch of different groups, focusing on structural hardening, utilizing best practices through the Ventura County Fire Department, through local city fire departments, through the RCDs, other fire safe councils, CAL FIRE, and the National Fire Protection Association guidelines when it comes to home hardening. Defensible space creation, utilizing the fire hazard reduction program standards through cities and through Ventura County Fire, and also focusing on CAL FIRE standards. And the fuels treatment projects are the part that I really would like to discuss with you. So most of the projects usually focus on brush clearance within the wild and urban interface, which though these are important, there's other areas within fuel beds and other areas that haven't been addressed in previous plans that we would like to expand to. So I'm working on expanding to address eucalyptus groves that run throughout cities, which essentially create wild and urban interfaces that are throughout neighborhoods, and also on major arundo removal projects. I've done a lot of arundo removal projects with many of you in the Ventura River, and it is the bane of my existence, and it's something that I would love to try to get more funding for. So I want to try to make sure to address this and also work on redefining what the wild and urban interface can really mean, particularly when it comes to Ventura County, because there's so many people, especially homeless individuals, that are in these high fire severity zones that don't get classified as high fire severity zones because they are in riparian corridors. And as many of you know, arundo is incredibly flammable, and it, you know, the removal is beneficial for waterways and water availability as well. And so another component that I'm also working with is evacuation planning. So I'm working with the Office of Emergency Services, with different transportation agencies, law enforcement, and we're also utilizing predictive mapping measures to try to identify where potential pinch points could be for evacuation, and using that data to create a more informed evacuation plan for specific areas. But yeah, what I would really like to do is do a call out, because I have a pretty substantial list of fuels projects that was provided to me by the Ventura County Fire Department. But I'd love to know if any of your groups or anyone else is working on particular grants, or you have particular needs that you would like fulfilled. So that could either fall into the Greater Ojai Plan, or the City of Ventura, or even the West Side Community Council's plan that address needs that are within the Ventura River. I know that I was working on a grant, the V11 grant, that the funding ran out, I believe, last year for arundo removal, but having that data specific would really help the argument for the need for more funding for these projects, especially when it comes to the dam removal. So I know that Paul kind of helped kick that off with the arundo removal being one of the first steps for the removal of the dam. And if we can use that argument for the removal with fire as well, I think it would make a really strong argument. CAL FIRE has funded arundo removal projects before, and also in the Ventura River, in the Ventura River estuary, particularly through at Emerald Wood. So it is something that they have supported in the past. But I'd like to try to make a really strong argument for that as well, for the continuation of that project. And yeah, it was pretty much my short little overview of what I'm doing. And I would really love to talk with more of you and get your ideas of what your needs are for your future projects. You know, what are your wish list things for particularly fuels projects? We're also highlighting the GOAT program or the planned herbivory when it comes to Ojai and also throughout Ventura County for the removal of invasive species. But I also want to highlight adaptive mitigation for fire. So we're not continuing to do the same projects over and over and over again and expect a different result, or, you know, just end up creating more work for ourselves later. So trying to highlight the need for more habitat restoration and removal of type conversions and things like that. But I would love to have your voices be heard. I want to try to make this process inclusive and representative of people in the area. So,
Hey, thanks, Kate, for that presentation. The CWPPs are really important for wildfire resiliency in our area. So I appreciate the hard work in updating a county-wide one. Those are really hard. If anyone has any questions, feel free to raise a hand. We also have her contact info. Oh, it went away.
oh, sorry.
Feel free to put it in the chat so people can reach out, because highlighting projects in these CWPPs, they're only updated maybe every 10 years. So if someone's calling for projects, this is the time to get in there what you think you need.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to put this plug in. So I'm also trying to change that measure as well. So I'm trying to make these documents be more living documents.
Mm-hmm.
So they are more representative, especially because everything's changing at a way more rapid rate than a 10-year. And by creating these localized plans, we have more people that are invested, and then we can regularly address these smaller needs, and then that can be used to easily make an amendment to this plan. And so we can make ongoing amendments, and then we can do a full overhaul in about 10 years, 6 to 10 years. So we are being as representative as possible. But yeah, if you guys have any wish list projects you'd like me to include, any kind of, dream big, I would love to try to include as much as possible. I want to make sure, because if it's not listed in here, or if there's not something that kind of is relevant to what you're doing, it's a lot harder to get funded by CAL FIRE in particular. So I want to make sure that we could try to get as much money to the area as possible.
Yeah, very
Oh,
much.
Kathy asked that if I'm working with Dan Wall. I have been working with Dan Wall. Dan is leaving. I think he's actually probably gone now. So, but I'm working with the County Office of Emergency Services since they've been providing Dan with most of his info. So.
Perfect. And then just so everyone does know, Kate and I are part of our organizations are part of the Ventura County Wildfire Collaborative, which I will be presenting in a few months here, I believe, and introducing that. But point being, we're all working together with all the municipalities across the county for OES locally and regionally, just so everyone's aware. So we're all kind of talking the same talk and walking the same walk with respect to wildfire resiliency. All right, well, Kate put her contact info in the chat. Feel free to reach out, give her some ideas for some projects. Thanks so much for the time, Kate. We're going to pivot over to our next presenter here. Tara, you there?
Yes.
Hey, alrighty, Tara. Is it just going to be you presenting, or do you?
Yeah,
have
it's just me. I did get a few quotes from the youth, but a lot of them are still in school right now, so
No
it was a
worries.
little bit difficult. Yeah.
All right, well, feel free to share your screen. So we have up next is Tara Fay with the crew, the Concerned Resource and Environmental Workers. She's going to give an update on the Green Valley project, which I think many members of the Watershed Council take part in. All right, Tara, well, it's coming in. Great. So feel free to take it away.
All right. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Tara. I am the program director of the Green Valley project with the crew. If you haven't heard of the Green Valley project or the crew, basically the crew is an organization focused on creating jobs for young adults in Ojai Valley between the years of 16 and 25 years old. Our field workers typically do fire clearance, shipping, trail maintenance, and help with environmental restoration projects. And the Green Valley project is kind of our new youth volunteer program that got started in 2020, where teens can help to make a difference in our environment through different environmental restoration projects, educational and leadership opportunities, and internships with us and our partners. Some of our partner organizations are Once Upon a Watershed, OVLC, PAX Environmental, and Watershed Progressive. So this is just kind of something that I like to show some of the kids at the beginning of the program. This map shows where biodiversity is at risk in America. And if you can kind of look at it, the reddest area is over here in California. So, oops. It's really important that we take a really good look at what we have here, and we're able to help restore environments and habitats so that we can have some more biodiversity and help the environment kind of heal a little bit. The Green Volcano is kind of our plan for achieving an environmental revolution in teens, the community, and the entire, hopefully, world. So basically, what we're hoping is there's already programs for early childhood and elementary school education. But where we're seeing a little bit of lacking in environmental education would be in middle school programs, high school programs. And then we just want to make sure that there is the opportunity for as much environmental development as possible before they go to college and end up having environmental careers. So we're trying to spark that original interest in environmental restoration as teens. So this is some of our programs as we go up the list. In middle school, we have our Matilaha Middle School Native Plant Program. We have about 125 kids in this program. It's in school, after school, getting kids involved in our California native plant gardens, doing some really cool projects with trees and going to Middle Stork Creek and just exploring the environment. And that's with Once Upon a Watershed. And then in high school, we have Nordoff. It's a high school in Ojai. Nordoff classes planting and maintaining oak circles. PACS Environmental Science Institute, which is a career development and educational program. Our Green Valley Project Communications Internship. Our Green Valley Project Youth Council. Paid positions with the Nordoff Nursery. Paid positions with the crew. And then hopefully community involvement in our restoration projects and events, so that the entire community is really excited to participate and just really engage in all of the different environmental restoration projects that are currently happening, because there's so many. And when we have support from everybody in the community, things go a lot more smoothly. So just talking a little bit more about each of the projects, our Matilaha Middle School Native Plant Program. It's about 125 middle school students. They talk about gardening, native plants, restoration. They have a California Native Plants Club after school where they can make compost tea and acorn pancakes with elderberry syrup and a lot of other very fun things. Super exciting. Love that we were able to incorporate this year. So over at the Ojai Meadows Preserve, we have these oak circles that we've been working on for the past couple of years. So basically we have 60+ tree circles that students have planted. They've been watering them, weeding them, mulching, and planting more tree circles. And basically what a tree circle is a little oak in the middle and then some sister plants all around that will grow really tall and shade the oak tree so that hopefully it's able to grow and not just like die because of the crazy sun. They were also able to help plant about 24 more native plants and a whole bunch of grass plugs as well. Okay, so our PACS Environmental Science Institute is basically a program where teens can go on 10 weekends and work with botany experts, environmental restoration experts, arboriculture, archaeology, tribal resources, field technology, and a whole bunch more. They were able to see a bald eagle in the first class. That was really, really cool. And then they also were able to do a lot of really amazing things. Yeah, so this is from their birding class, and that's the bald eagle. Okay, so Green Valley Project Youth Council is one of our somewhat new programs. Basically, teens from Ojai are designing, planting, and actively promoting pollinator corridors for this session. Basically, they get to design and plant their own educational gardens, and then they also are working to create these take-home pollinator kits for local residents. So they were able to create a little plant palette and then brochures, and then canvas those brochures to the community. And we were able to get 50 residents to sign up for our pollinator corridor and plant 10 pollinator-friendly plants for each garden. And then this is an example of one of the pollinator gardens that they were able to design with the Watershed Progressive team. So they were able to kind of figure out all of the different plants that would work for pollinators, figure out which plants would really work with the dimensions of the area that we had at Mama Walnut Farm, and then also determine whether the area needed a bioswale, where that bioswale would fit. We were able to dig the bioswale and basically create a whole bunch of community events where they were able to plant this. And it was really beautiful at the end. And then this is a brochure that the kids made for their join the pollinator project. Basically, it shows the 2 different kits that people are able to choose if they wanted to join the pollinator corridor. Basically, we were asking people to give a $50 donation, totally optional. They could have given us 0, they could have given us more. But the kit comes with 10 fully grown plants and seeds for your yard. And they were really cute. And then there's also a planting guide, but if people did not feel comfortable planting, the kids would actually go to people's houses and plant for them and make sure there was enough space around each of the plants for them to grow to full size, and make sure that the owners knew about how much water they needed to give to each plant until they were fully established. Here's some more information, fun facts. Basically, we were able to plant over 600 pollinator-friendly plants, and then the 50 home gardens, and then 4 educational gardens were landscaped by our students this year. And then on top of our Green Valley Project Youth Council, we have a communications internship that works really closely with our youth council to kind of create some sort of a artistic and creative communication to the community. And so this year they decided to create an art exhibit that basically worked with film director Ray Powers and a band called Sage Against the Machine. And they were able to create their own song and music video, a mural, and a 10-piece photo series that is going to be displayed at the Museum of Agriculture, which is really exciting because then we can get more people to understand what our program is. And it's going to spread a little bit from Ojai to Santa Paula. So if you guys are interested in that, here is our exhibit opening day. And I can give you information if you would like. I have basically like our website in the last slide, so you can kind of check that out. Other than our like main educational programs, we also have outdoor Saturdays, which is basically every Saturday our youth have the opportunity to work in different various restoration projects with the crew and our partners. Some of these include Middle Store Creek, planting and watering days, building bioswales, hikes, tabling events, canvassing, and more. Okay, and basically one of the things that we really hope that some of the teens in our program will want to do is eventually have want to work in the environmental field. So basically, an exciting thing that we've been seeing recently is a lot of our environmental Green Valley Project Youth Council members have been applying to work with the crew, and they've successfully joined the team, which is really exciting. We have Ava over here and Miranda. So we have a lot more, but these are some of like our longest crew member / GVP members. So yeah, okay. So past, present, and future. In the past, we did a Reoaking Ojai project where we planted 50 oak trees for our community for free. We taught people about the importance of having trees to provide shade, provide habitat for the animals in Ojai, and then also as a water absorber to make sure that we are absorbing as much water as we can into our soil instead of having it run off. In the present, we worked on our pollinator corridor project where we planted 800 plus native pollinator plants, had our 50 home pollinator gardens and 4 educational community gardens planted. And in the future, we are hoping to do a tamarisk removal project with UC Davis. So that is really exciting, but we also have a lot more amazing possibilities, especially with either the Raptor Center or the Audubon Society. So that's pretty cool. Here's a message from Greer Faust, our youth council president. She was part of the canvassing team. We had 2 different youth councils this year. So I'm going to start from the middle because it's a lot. Almost 2 years ago, I joined Green Valley Project on a whim. Now I'm president of the youth council with a deep passion for the environment. GVP has not only given me the skills to be a competent young adult, but it has also helped me to realize that I want to dedicate my life to. GVP gives so much and is a major benefactor to the community in more than one way. It is up to each of us to make a difference and become an active part of saving the world. We know, and this is Summer Fraser, a Green Valley Project intern, and that's it. Okay, thank you,
Wow.
everyone. Sorry, that was a lot of information.
No, that was great, Tara. It's always so great seeing successful opportunities like this. You can really tell those kids are taking this in strides and are passionate about it. So great work on that. That's always exciting to see. Training the next generation too, and I'm always happy to hear that. So great work, really great work. And Tara, if you don't mind putting your email in the chat in case people want to end up connecting on your projects, that would be great. Any questions while we're here? All righty, we are going to move on and we're going to be closing out the meeting shortly here. Do we have any other general questions, open discussions? Feel free to digitally raise a hand, I guess, or put into the chat. Oh, Tara sent the email to me. I'll resend it to everyone else here. All right, everyone. Well, that's going to conclude today's meeting, done just a little bit early, about 20 minutes early. Thanks everyone for taking the time today. Thank you to all the presenters for the great, thoughtful, and thorough presentations. Our next meeting is going to be the first Thursday in August. We are in June right now. Again, this meeting was recorded. It will be posted within a week on the Watershed Council webpage. If you need a recording sooner, feel free to reach out to myself or my colleague Heidi. And thank you, everyone. Yeah, with that, we're concluded. Have a good day, everyone.